Hey guys, this is Ross, and I'm going to show you guys how to make this original pad sound. It sounds like this. And just to give you guys kind of an application of what it sounds like, I made this little snippet of a project I made a while ago with the synthesizer patch in it. So just listen for it. So this is it. It's kind of, the cutoff is all the way down and starts to build up. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. You can start to hear it build up a little. Alright. Okay, so first thing we want to do is file new sound. Always. And so for this sound, it's actually pretty simple. There are some things that we add to it to make it a little more lifelike or give it some character, but it's just like most other melodic things, it's just the saw. For this one I chose to use Square Saw 2 instead though. So oscillator 1, 2, and 3, turn them all on. And Square Saw 2 for this one. Square Saw 2 for this one. And for oscillator 3 we want sine square, sine triangle, anything with sine. And turn this wavetable all the way to sine. And we want 1 to be plus 12, 1 at 0, and we want this one at minus 12. And so, listen, this is the sound we get. Kind of sounds like some of the other sounds I've made, but we're gonna add a couple things to really distinguish it from the other ones. First of which is gonna be go to envelope 4 and turn this level down just a tad, maybe about there, and turn up this is the release, because this envelope, as you can see if you didn't know already, is applied to the amp and the bypass, and basically the rest of the volume for pretty much every new sound you start, which is why you will never see anyone usually ever touching the 4th envelope. But this basically controls the volume. It's like a volume envelope for the entire series, like the routing. And so when we put up the release on this, if you listen carefully, we're gonna turn this all the way up to about there. That's a low release right there. You're gonna hear a release of not a filter envelope, but a volume. So this is what it sounds like. So it kind of trails off in volume, or amplitude, I guess technically, but not in cutoff. So it's not cutting off any frequencies. It's just purely volume. And this is how you can, this release on the envelope 4 is how I like to make most of my pads, or even leads really, and even mids. Just turn up the release a little bit, maybe about here, or even lower sometimes. But it makes all of your sounds not sound like they end like right away, to give it, again, a more lifelike and more realistic kind of sound. So we're gonna leave release here, I think. Let's hear it. Yeah, that's pretty good. Or I guess just right now I'll just double click it to reset it to its default position, and I'm gonna turn this up to about there. That way we can macro control the release whenever we want. Because like say in a song you don't want too much release, which I did use in some of my songs, so I'm just gonna leave that there. Okay, and the second thing we want to do is we want to make this sound wide. So go to voicing, turn unisono up to 2, pan position full invert or whatever, whichever you prefer, and just turn it down a little bit, maybe about there, so we don't get way too much separation. And let's hear it now. Oops, release this all the way down. Okay, so that sounds a little more like a pad, but there are a few key things that are missing from this to make it the same as what I had. So I'm gonna build up on that by starting with the filter, low pass 4. This is actually going to be pretty much the same as the super saw bass that I made earlier. Take macro 2, put it on cutoff, turn resonance down to about here, and if you really want to, you can turn it down a little more and macro control it so you got some more movement going on and you hit the cutoff. So this is what this sounds like. So that you can effectively use it better as a pad. So if we put it about here, just turn down the cutoff for pretty much any patch and it'll start to sound more like a pad. But obviously we want this to be a really strong pad, so we turn it all the way up. Okay, and now we want to add, as usual, we always want to add some reverb. Size about there, density about there, color all the way down, and dry wet about here, and we're gonna macro that down again so we don't have too much reverb when we turn it up all the way, but when we have lower cutoff we have some atmosphere like that, and then when we go up we still have some reverb, but not an insane amount to where it's just drowning everything out. And then we want to put on dimension expander, turn size all the way down, dry wet to about here. We don't really need this that much because we already stereo separated it, but since we only have 2 voices we kind of want the sound to be even wider, so we use dimension expander, and we don't want too much size, otherwise it'll just start to sound like shit. And just keep in mind when you use dimension expander, even a little bit, your volume goes up, so you should turn down the master a little bit. Like that. EQ, high shelf up a little bit, low shelf down a little bit. And now one last thing, saving it for last, was vibrato, and this is what makes this sound not sound so generic in my opinion. So take LFO5, apply it on all 3 oscillators, pitch everything up 1, there we go, and make the X fade curve all the way to the top, turn off restart and turn on mono, and drag this down to about here. And you can, again, you can use whatever rate you want, but for this patch in particular I like 1 and 12. You can kind of hear it, but the amp is kind of low so you don't hear it as much, so we're going to use this special thing over here called the internal envelope and apply it to the amp and turn that up to about there. And what this thing does is it's just another envelope kind of like these, except it's just it's a lot simpler and it's internal. It's in the LFO, so you don't have to, it's for each one, so you don't have to use these to save on these if you want. Obviously you get less control. There's just attack and decay with, I don't know why, I honestly don't know why they don't have any values for any of the notches. That kind of pisses me off sometimes, but yeah, there's really no way of knowing the time for these. So you just kind of have to mess around with them. So for this one, I just turned down a little bit so that it applies the vibrato earlier. So just to show what it sounds like. And if we turn the attack all the way down, it applies the vibrato right away, but if we turn it up, you have to hold it longer to hear it. It's kind of hard to hear because for some reason my screen capture software has terrible audio quality. But trust me, this is where I like to put it, right about there. So it applies after about, I don't know, like a quarter of a second. And it starts applying about this much, as you can see how far we dragged it. And so if you hear it with the vibrato, it makes that sound. It gives it more character, just like adding vibrato to almost anything. It makes it sound more realistic, and kind of, I don't want to say video game-esque, but I mean, that's what it kind of sounds like to me. And we can add white noise when you add more cutoff to about there or so, just to give your pad more strength and more presence. Yeah, that's what happens when you add too much noise. It sounds terrible. There we go. Okay, and that's basically it. I mean, you can add some panning effects with some of the oscillators if you want. Or, you know, you can add some inserts here and there to make it more interesting. But this is kind of like the base pad I like to leave it as, and then just tweak with it once I start a new project. Oh, let's label this cut off. Cut off. And so, I really like to use a cutoff for this one in particular. And so as you heard in my song that I use it in, you can use it for some pretty cool things. And if you just mess with some of these wavetables and just keep all of these pretty much the same, you can get a lot of really cool different sounding pads. And you can also detune this if you want to get an even wider pad. But that's up to you guys. This is kind of the base. So yeah, that's pretty much how you make it. And thanks again for watching, everyone. Have a good time mixing with all the new synths that I've helped you guys make. So enjoy.